Hi, I'm Matthew Herzberg. This is the Myopia Mindset, and this is a preview into a bonus episode that the paid supporters of the Myopia Mindset get each and every month. This episode is about FDA indications and why they matter. Dr. Cary Herzberg joins me for this episode to discuss this great topic. And if you are considering becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset, these bonus episodes, in addition to our extended versions of every episode we do, is our way of saying thank you for supporting everything we're doing here. My mission is to get the word out about myopia management and why it's the coolest thing in optometry, and in hopes that more ECPs can learn about it and start doing it. And if you are interested, it's $12 a month to become a paid supporter. And that's basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every month. And that's how I like to put it. If you would buy me a cup of coffee each and every week just to nerd out about myopia, bring on amazing guests, and spread the word about how awesome this specialty is, then please consider doing so. I'd love to have your support. All right. Thank you so much to our paid supporters. Let's get to the episode. All right, welcome back to the Myopia Mindset. This is a podcast where myopia matters and the mindset of those that practice myopia management matters most. And I have with me my regular guest co-host, Dr. Cary Herzberg. Cary, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks, man. It's good to be here.
And if you are part of the uninitiated, welcome to the Myopia Mindset. Cary is my father. I grew up in his practice. We've worked very closely together over the last 20 years, developing the American Academy of Orthokeratology and Myopia Control, as well as a meeting called Vision by Design. And Cary and I talk about myopia every single week. And that was part of the inspiration behind this podcast. When I thought about doing a podcast again, I was like, I got to have my dad on because he and I talk about this stuff every week. And all we really have to do is just press record and make those conversations public, because we dive pretty deep into some great topics.
Yeah.
So, Cary, I have for us today, I sent you a link to an article that I've been looking at recently, and it's an article about informed consent and why different FDA indications matter. It was published back in April, I believe, of 2024. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. And it got me thinking because, prior to this, I spent the last couple of years as a clinical sales consultant with Johnson & Johnson selling the Ability lens. And one of the key benefits of Ability was its FDA approval, or is its FDA approval. Mm-hmm. And when I sold that lens, I went from practice to practice talking about Ability all over the country. And one of the key factors that I would see in like blossoming myopia management doctors, or at least their interest was beginning to blossom, one of the barriers that they had for doing myopia management was FDA approval. And having an FDA approved product available to them seemed to remove that barrier, which I found to be exceptionally interesting because I grew up in your practice, mm-hmm. and you did only off-label orthokeratology.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, yes, you did do.
We fit the Paragon CRT lens too, and then some of the VST products we fit those.
Right, but your bread and butter was off-label, right?
Well, we came from off-label. It's before there was on-label, there was off-label.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting history, particularly myopia management and ortho-K, because back in the day, before FDA approval, before any of this happened, we had the cowboys running around doing almost anything. It was like it was something you couldn't build a professional practice on. I understand why there's this, why the desire for FDA to get an FDA approved product. I understand that, but to begin with, you got to understand where we came from. It was basically back in the 90s. This was There was a fellow named William Hurd who was an OD, and he actually had a group of very well-known orthokeratologists that actually worked within his system. He had a system for marketing lenses, and but he went out, at some point he went over the top and he started to say things that weren't true about the
Hmm.
modality. For instance, he said that that it wasn't temporary, it was permanent, and that it was accepted by the military, which it wasn't. And on he went. Well, the FTC got a hold of him
Hmm.
and actually prosecuted. It was really some dark moments because the doctors, and many of them that I knew were good colleagues of mine who were part of had signed on to his marketing plan, were affected by this. So it's really kind of sad too, because he died. He died of actually cancer afterwards. But I have a feeling that it was just all of this was such a downhill thing for him. And he was a well-known, respected
Hmm.
optometrist. It wasn't like he was, you know, on the dark side or something. He was well respected. So, we understood at the time I was involved in the National Eye Research Foundation and leading it. We understood at the time that we need to get something done here because we've got, if we're going to be able to advertise this modality, we need to have FDA approval.
Yeah.
So that's really where the impetus for this comes from. I know I've read articles and said that if it isn't FDA approved, it's not safe. That's BS. It's not true. It doesn't mean any of
Hmm.
that. It means that it means that the FDA has recognized it is being studied enough that they can actually say that that is has been studied and can do this job with let's say myopia control, myopia
Right.
management. So I attended the Silver Springs meeting in Washington, around Washington, that discussed FDA approval for myopia. It was an interesting project. The FDA was very interested in improving myopia. But if you understand what this said at the time, the FDA recognized that 50% control of myopia was going to be the standard. Okay. So they
Hmm.
didn't say that you had to do 70 or 80. They said if you could do 50% of myopia, you're going to limit the amount of high myopia. Over 75% that's going to be eliminated. And they saw that as being meaningful. So
Right.
that's really, so, any of these indications that get approved or not approved, I mean, yes, it's recognized it, but we've done our share, and throughout the industry to document, both on the multifocal soft lens front, my site included, and Ortho K devices, that those, and atropine for that matter, that those devices can, in fact, impact myopia progression. That's a known thing. That's a certain thing. Just because the FDA says so or not doesn't mean it doesn't exist and isn't a fact.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, in the article they were saying that if your patient's running away with myopia, and you haven't used an FDA approved device, then you'll be sleepless at night. Well, let me tell you, you can use FDA
Yeah.
approved devices, and your patient could run away with myopia anyway. So it's not like I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not giving somebody a brain tumor. You understand what I'm saying? I'm actually working within a system and a very scientific based, knowledgeable system that can actually do for you what you need to do as far as managing that myopia. Now, the other point that was interesting about this is it is true, and what you brought up earlier, Matt, was an excellent point. Patients are more comfortable with FDA approved
Of
devices.
course. Yeah.
Okay. It's an easier sell, quotation marks, if you have an FDA approved device. And I've worked in the J&J shell as well, and we did use this and should have used it because they did have myopia management indications for their products, so FDA approved. On the other hand, it's an entry point to the field. I think. I don't think it's as the article was trying to make it like it's an endpoint. It's not an endpoint at all. It's an entry
Hmm.
point. It's something you have in your toolbox. And if a patient, and we had patients that were insistent on FDA approval, and that's what we did for them. I mean, they were, once we had disclosed what that meant and what it didn't mean.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, let me give just a brief summary. I've got a brief summary here of the article. It goes like this: In Informed Consent, Why Different FDA Indications Matter, Andrew Newkirk, OD, delves into the critical importance of understanding on-label versus off-label treatments in myopia management. Through a lens of trust and responsibility, Dr. Newkirk explains how FDA indications safeguard patient health, guide ethical clinical decisions, and ensure transparent communication with parents. He emphasizes prioritizing on label treatments to slow myopia progression while carefully considering off label options when necessary. This thoughtful piece highlights the need for clarity and informed consent and the role of providers in protecting children's eye health. with science-based care. And, my reaction to the article is, my opinion is like, I'm biased, right? Because I came up in an era through working in your practice and then being the executive director of the American Academy of Orthokeratology and myopia control. And the majority of our members weren't doing on label orthokeratology, but it's not like they were being irresponsible with it.
Right.
The informed consent is the most important part of this article, in my opinion.
I agree.
And I have been in so many practices where I was like, well, just cover that in your informed consent. And they're like, my what? And I'm like, you're not using an informed consent? And they're like, no, what is that? And I was like, are you serious? And then it's like, I start talking about like the need the in writing, you need to update your patients and make sure they understand everything that you've discussed with them about the kind of treatment modality that you're going to be using. And I think that when it comes to FDA approval, I mean, that's kind of one of the things that COVID has kind of done is FDA approval is now more important than ever. I think in your era of coming up in orthokeratology and myopia management, we didn't call it myopia management back then, but that's what it was. That it's not that FDA approval mattered less. It's just that there's a different, how do I put this? It it's like we have a more informed parent base. We have the internet now, right? The first question that's going to come into a parent's head is, why have I never heard of this? And B, is it FDA approved? And then your third question is, who's making the lens, right? Like, do I recognize a
You
company?
want me to answer that first question?
Yes, please
Why have I
do.
never heard of this?
Why have I never
Because
heard of
I
it? Yeah.
continue to hear this to this day, and believe me, I've been doing it for over 40 years,
Yes.
This is because our colleagues listening right now don't talk about it. Okay,
Uh-huh.
don't discuss it
Yes.
with their patients. That's why they haven't heard about it before. I mean, it's strictly a failure. I mean, it's a fumble by our profession
Mhm.
specifically that they refuse to talk or whatever for whatever the reason is. And I think I have some ideas on that. We could discuss, definitely have a podcast on that. But that's why the patients don't hear about it because their doctors don't talk about it. Okay,
Yeah.
because in fact, to get them even to talk about myopia management at this point, is a tussle because it's time consuming and they want the patient out of the chair. But yes, informed consent's very, this is where really where the meat and potatoes of this thing goes because you've got to do informed consent for your patients. If you do that, then, then the patient is given an opportunity to participate in their care, which is what you have to have. I mean, it just
Yes.
isn't, a one-way thing there. And so that really boils down to what the most important aspect of this is. But we have different levels going on here. I mean, seriously, there's research going on. I mean, with certain levels of care, you can reach a lot higher percentage of myopia control and management than you can with the FDA approved devices. I mean, this is just a
Mhm.
fact. So it's like, do you stop and just stop it there, until somebody else gets an FDA approval? I remember back in the day when these when these companies would get their approval and they'd say to us as running the academy, they'd say, well, you can't talk about any of these other products
Right.
then on stage because they're not
Mhm.
FDA approved. I said, seriously? I said, we're not about that. We're about exploration and of spreading the scope of what we're doing and increasing knowledge and getting our abilities up. We're not, specifically if there's a product out there that isn't FDA approved, but it shows some signs that it's going to do better for myopia management or ortho, then we're going to be doing that, talking about it. So they wanted us actually to not have it on our stage, on our platform to talk about any
Right.
other product. And to be honest with you, Matt, if we had done that, we'd have been done in about an hour or two instead of a meeting that lasted 4.5 days.
Yeah.
So, back in the day. So, it's comical almost in a way that what you could be, these companies could push and push and push for this stuff, but once they get it, then they want to shut everybody else out of it. They don't want
Yeah.
and I understand the motivation. They paid for it. There's a lot of money that went into getting it. It's expensive, and that's the other
Right.
argument we could talk about today. Is it's really worth it? Is
Yeah.
FDA approval really worth this? Because it really keeps us from really getting to the where we want to be, which is that's kind of myopia management that really is
Exactly.
very, very successful.
Yeah,
So it
that's
really works
exactly
against
why
that.
that's exactly why I wanted us to talk about
Yeah.
this. So like maybe the better way to put this is FDA approval a double-edged sword,
Well,
right?
yeah.
Because to your point, like is it restricting the is it restricting the use of off-label which in some cases could be more effective or more suitable for the practitioner. You know,
Yeah,
we have
yeah,
in the AAOMC, I'm a member of the AAOMC, and in our organization, we have a number of fitters who are designing lenses like with Wave or iSpace or OrthoTool or whatever. They're doing custom designed
right.
Ortho K lenses. And it's like, why would we add more restrictions to that process,
And
right?
they're
Like,
using, yeah, they're using products for like biofinity and other ones that
hmm
are very effective. It's effective, more effective than what's out there, as far as myopia management for on a soft multifocal basis. It's also effective. I was about to say, this isn't thalidomide. Okay, God help us. Back in the 60s, that happened. Women took this because they reduced the symptoms during the, being pregnant, and it actually caused birth defects. It was horrible. This is this is not rocket science. Again, you have to say it again and again. You're not going, okay, so let's say you used a product that was a little bit less effective than another as far as myopia control. Any aspect of myopia management that you do for that patient is a benefit compared to most of
hmm
your colleagues are doing nothing. Okay, so
right.
it's not like, okay, this is not life and death. Any kind of ortho-K device, we know how safe ortho-K is. It's going to
hmm
be fine for that patient. How effective is it going to be? Well, your doctor can manage that. I mean, it's not on that safety level anymore. Okay, we
right.
got through that. We proved it. Jeff Walleen came up with a study that showed how safe, and Pauline Cho did the studies early in the 2000s that show how safe this procedure is. And we proved it again and again. Mark Bullimore, God bless him, in his studies, Russian study most recently has shown it's as safe as a daily wear soft lens. So get off the soapbox already, right? I mean, this is a safe procedure that ought to be done by most my colleagues if they're going to do myopia management. They should be, you can't think about doing myopia management without having all your tools in the arsenal in the toolbox, right?
Right.
This has got to be one of your prime tools because still the gold standard. So, that's not to say you can't do other things, but you should have the ability to do it and you should be utilizing it, right?
Right.
So, again, I think the FDA thing is only what it is because we make it what it is. I think
Okay.
if we went into a situation where mentally we could clear our own head and say, you know what, let me look at this practically speaking, like we just talked about, you'd say, okay, I've got all these other devices. As long as, like I said, I have had I don't have, every patient didn't ask for FDA approval. When I told them that this wasn't FDA approved, they didn't, they asked me to clarify. I clarified, and they went on and did the thing.
Yeah.
Um, and there are ways of doctors can do today that can do internal studies themselves to support any of these arguments they want. I mean, they can use whatever product they want to do. They could do a little study inside their office. They can use this
hmm
as a marketing tool and grow their practice, by the way.
Yeah.
And they can then show this to the patient. This is all you need. I mean, this is your documented study that you've done to support your conclusions. Okay. And there
Yeah.
are a number of them out there too that have been done that'll support these conclusions. So yes, FDA approval is nice. It was really important back in the 90s
hmm
when we had an industry that didn't have anything going for itself, and we had a lot of cowboys out there that were doing whatever they wanted to do. But today, no, I don't think it's as important because you have all the evidence is in on the
Yeah.
safety. It's
The
there.
you're not wrong, obviously. The evidence is in, but then at the same time, nobody wants to be the person that's like, yeah, FDA approval doesn't matter when it comes to myopia management. It's like it's not going to be phrased that way. Like I myself doing a podcast, I don't want my messaging to be that like FDA approval doesn't matter. Like it does matter.
Okay, do you know
It's
what
not the
FDA?
be all end all aspect of
Do you
this.
know what it
Like
is
this is
approved approval?
nuanced.
You know what it does say?
Yeah.
The FDA approval says if you can control 50% of the progression of myopia, that's a device that's credible. That's coming from the FDA. Just because they haven't studied a device that you're using and said that that's because for
Correct. Yes.
logical reasons, because it costs you millions of dollars to get that done,
Yeah.
doesn't mean there's any less basis for that multifocal soft lens or whatever it is you're doing. It has as big a place as any of the other ones in the marketplace because it does the same kind of job or better. Really all an FDA approval at this point is certifying the fact that you've got 50% control or better of myopia. That's all they're doing, and we know that's not worth. There's a lot of companies that's not worth God knows $2 million whatever it is to have that done. It doesn't mean that their product doesn't have value. It means that
Right.
they don't feel like they need that, and they're right. I don't think they need to get FDA approval either. I mean, come on. It's like, you've got the device out there. I think what really needs.
All right, well, that's it for this regular version of the episode, but the discussion doesn't stop here. It actually continues in an extended version of this episode, which is available to our Substack supporters. You can, if you're interested in getting the rest of the episode, consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. In addition to an extended version of this episode and every other episode that we do, you'll also get access to exclusive monthly bonus episodes of the Myopia Mindset. And I know you're interested. You've made it this far. And for the cost is $12 a month, which is basically the cost of a cup of coffee each and every week. And that's how I like to put it. Listen, if you would buy me a cup of coffee each and every week to nerd out about myopia, to bring on amazing guests, to spread the word about how awesome myopia management is and how more ECPs should be engaged in this specialty, then please consider becoming a paid supporter of the Myopia Mindset. You can do so on our Substack. myopiamindset.substack.com is how you do that. Thank you so much for your consideration. I'll see you at the next one.